It was a chilly autumn evening in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, a picturesque town known for its coastal beauty and close-knit community. As twilight descended, the streets were quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the rustling of leaves in the wind. It was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked and greeted strangers with a smile, a place where danger felt like a distant concept. But in late 2010, the town's sense of security was shattered. The disappearance of 29-year-old Nadine Taylor, a vibrant woman with a promising future, plunged the community into a state of fear and disbelief. What began as a search for a missing person would soon uncover a story of manipulation, violence, and betrayal, forever altering the fabric of this serene town. At the center of this tragedy was Elliott Laffin, a man whose outward demeanor masked a chilling darkness. His actions would not only claim the life of an innocent woman, but also expose systemic failures that allowed him to remain free despite a history of troubling behavior. Nadine Taylor was a beacon of positivity in her community. Born and raised in Dartmouth, she was the youngest of 3 siblings and the apple of her parents' eye. Her love for cooking was evident from a young age, and she dreamed of one day opening her own restaurant. Friends and family described her as ambitious, warm-hearted, and fiercely loyal, a woman who saw the best in people, even when they didn't see it in themselves. In her late 20s, Nadine was thriving. She had recently completed a culinary program and was working as a sous chef at a local restaurant. While her professional life was on the rise, she had expressed to close friends that she felt a void in her personal life. Like many others in her generation, Nadine turned to online dating in hopes of finding someone special. It was on one of these platforms that she connected with Elliott Laffin. His profile depicted a man who seemed charming and dependable, someone who shared her love of nature and a desire for meaningful connections. Their conversations quickly became frequent and personal, with Laffin displaying an uncanny ability to say exactly what Nadine wanted to hear. Unbeknownst to Nadine, this was not the first time Laffin had used charm and deceit to lure someone into his orbit. Elliott Laffin was born and raised in Nova Scotia, but his life was far from stable. By the time he reached adulthood, he had developed a reputation for being a drifter, someone who moved from place to place, job to job, and relationship to relationship without ever putting down roots. Those who knew him in his younger years described him as quiet, but there was always something unsettling about his demeanor. As he grew older, troubling patterns began to emerge. Laffin had a history of volatile relationships marked by manipulation and control. Women who had been involved with him spoke of his temper, his jealousy, and his need to dominate every aspect of their lives. Despite these red flags, Laffin had largely avoided severe consequences for his actions. His minor brushes with the law, mostly involving theft and fraud, did little to deter him from a path of increasing recklessness. By the time he met Nadine, his behavior had escalated to something far more sinister. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Nadine confided in friends about her budding connection with Laffin. She was excited about the prospect of meeting someone who seemed to genuinely understand her. When she told her best friend that she planned to meet him in person, there was little reason for concern. On the evening of their planned meeting, Nadine left her apartment with a sense of optimism. She sent a quick text to her friend, letting them know where she was going and promising to check in later. That was the last anyone heard from her. When Nadine failed to show up for work the next day, her coworkers were immediately alarmed. It was unlike her to miss a shift without notice, and calls to her phone went unanswered. Her family reported her missing later that day, setting off a search that would grip the town for weeks. The initial stages of the investigation focused on tracing Nadine's steps. Police reviewed her phone records and discovered her communications with Laffin. When they reached out to him, his demeanor was calm and cooperative, at least at first. He claimed that while he had spoken to Nadine online, he had never actually met her in person. But inconsistencies in Laffin's story quickly began to surface. Surveillance footage from a gas station near his home showed him purchasing items that investigators believed could be used to dispose of body shovels, garbage bags, and duct tape. Moreover, witnesses reported seeing a man matching Laffin's description in a wooded area outside of town around the time of Nadine's disappearance. Armed with this evidence, police obtained a warrant to search Laffin's property. What they found was both shocking and damning. Traces of Nadine's DNA were discovered in his vehicle, and several personal items belonging to her were hidden in his home. Despite the mounting evidence, Nadine's family held out hope that she might still be alive. But those hopes were dashed when police discovered her body buried in a shallow grave in a remote wooded area. The scene was one of horror. Nadine had been brutally attacked, and the evidence suggested that she had fought desperately for her life. The discovery sent shockwaves through Dartmouth. A community that had prided itself on safety and trust was now grappling with the reality that a predator had been living among them. As the investigation continued, more details about Laffin's past came to light. Women from across Nova Scotia came forward with stories of harrowing encounters with him. Some had been physically assaulted, while others spoke of psychological abuse and manipulation. One woman, who had narrowly escaped an encounter with Laffin years earlier, described him as a master manipulator. She recounted how he had initially been charming and attentive, only to become controlling and violent once he gained her trust. These accounts painted a chilling picture of a man who had spent years honing his ability to exploit and harm others. Yet, despite his history, Laffin had managed to avoid significant legal consequences until now. The trial of Stephen Elliott Laffin began in early 2012, and it quickly became one of the most closely watched cases in Nova Scotia's history. Prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence linking Laffin to Nadine's murder, including forensic evidence, witness testimony, and his own contradictory statements. The courtroom was packed with spectators, many of whom were there to support Nadine's family. Her mother, a pillar of strength throughout the trial, sat in the front row every day, clutching a photo of her daughter. During the trial, prosecutors argued that Laffin had meticulously planned Nadine's murder. They described how he had lured her into a false sense of security, only to betray her trust in the most horrific way possible. Laffin's defense team attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's case, suggesting that Nadine's death was the result of a tragic accident. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury was unconvinced. After weeks of emotional testimony and deliberation, Laffin was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years, ensuring that he would not harm anyone else. For Nadine's family, the verdict brought a measure of closure, but the pain of her loss remained immeasurable. In the years since her death, they have worked tirelessly to honor her memory by advocating for increased awareness of online safety and stronger protections for victims of violence. Laffin's case also sparked broader discussions about the justice system and its failures. Many questioned how someone with such a clear pattern of predatory behavior had been allowed to remain free for so long. These questions led to calls for reform, including better tracking of repeat offenders and increased support for survivors of abuse. Dartmouth was a town changed by Nadine Taylor's murder. The once idyllic community grappled with collective grief and the haunting realization that such evil could hide behind a seemingly ordinary facade. Local support groups saw an influx of individuals seeking help, not just for mourning but for processing their fears and rebuilding a sense of security. Neighborhood watch programs multiplied, and safety became a topic of conversation at community centers and schools. Educators and counselors worked with younger generations to teach them the importance of caution in the digital age, emphasizing that not everyone online is who they claim to be. The tragedy also forced local law enforcement to reevaluate their procedures. A review of the case revealed systemic gaps, including insufficient monitoring of individuals with histories of abusive behavior. These revelations led to the creation of new policies aimed at better tracking individuals flagged for potential violence. Nadine's story highlighted a grim reality: the growing prevalence of online predators. The case became a focal point for discussions about how technology, while revolutionary in connecting people, could also enable those with malicious intent to prey on unsuspecting victims. Social media platforms and dating apps faced increasing scrutiny. Activists called for stricter regulations, better identity verification processes, and more robust mechanisms for reporting and addressing suspicious behavior. Nadine's family became vocal advocates for these changes, partnering with organizations to spread awareness and push for legislative reforms. One significant outcome was the establishment of a provincial task force dedicated to combating online predation. The task force combined the expertise of law enforcement, cybercrime specialists, and victim advocacy groups to create a comprehensive approach to identifying and stopping predators before they could cause harm. In the years following Laffin's conviction, the women who had survived encounters with him began to share their stories publicly. Their courage not only brought attention to the warning signs of predatory behavior, but also inspired other survivors to come forward. One survivor, identified only as Rachel for her privacy, recalled how Laffin had used manipulation to isolate her from friends and family during their brief relationship. She described the immense relief she felt when she saw justice served in Nadine's case. "For years, I thought no one would believe me," she said in an interview. "But seeing him held accountable gave me a sense of closure I didn't think was possible." These stories became part of a larger movement to encourage survivors of abuse and violence to speak out and seek support. Advocacy groups worked tirelessly to amplify their voices, providing platforms for healing and education. The law enforcement officers and forensic experts who worked on Nadine's case also shared their reflections, shedding light on the complexities of investigating crimes like this. One detective spoke candidly about the emotional toll of the case. "It wasn't just another file for us," he said. "Nadine was someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friend. We owed it to her and her family to bring them justice." Forensic analysts detailed the painstaking process of piecing together evidence, from tracing Laffin's online interactions to analyzing the physical evidence found at the crime scene. Their work not only secured Laffin's conviction but also set a precedent for how similar cases could be approached in the future. Amid the pain and loss, Nadine's story became a symbol of resilience and hope. Each year, on the anniversary of her death, her family and friends gathered to celebrate her life and the positive change she inspired. They light candles, share memories, and reaffirm their commitment to creating a safer world. Her memory lives on in the foundation established in her name, which provides scholarships for aspiring chefs and supports initiatives aimed at combating violence and exploitation. Through this work, Nadine's dreams of making the world a better place are being realized in ways she could never have imagined. The case of Stephen Elliott Laffin is a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of betrayal. Yet, it is also a testament to the power of community, the importance of justice, and the enduring legacy of a life well lived. Nadine Taylor's story is not just a tale of tragedy, it is a call to action. It urges us to protect one another, to stand up against injustice, and to honor the memories of those we have lost by striving for a better future. As the sun sets over Dartmouth, its waters reflecting hues of gold and orange, one can't help but think of Nadine and the light she brought into the lives of those who knew her. While her absence is deeply felt, her spirit continues to inspire, proving that even in the face of darkness, the human spirit can prevail.